Hello and welcome to our program Where God Weeps, a program where we talk about the suffering and persecuted church around the world. From the busy streets of Kinshasa to the remote villages in the heart of the Congo Basin, the Catholic Church plays a vital role in the lives of millions of Congolese people. Congo is one of the wealthiest countries in Africa in terms of natural resources. But despite this wealthiness, Congo is among the 5 poorest countries in the world. Today, we delve into the heart of this remarkable country, exploring the challenges and triumphs faced by its inhabitants. Join me as we embark on a journey of faith, resilience, and hope in the Democratic Republic of Congo, guided by the knowledge and compassion of Maxime François Marsal, who works for the Pontifical Foundation Aid to the Church in Need, as the head of the department for French-speaking countries in Africa. Maxime, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you for having me.
Well, Maxime, when was the last time that you were in Congo, and why did you go to this country specifically?
So my last and first time in Congo was in May 2022, when I was able to visit 3 dioceses in the eastern part of the country. And the reason why I went is because it was actually my first trip with Aid to the Church in Need, and I took the opportunity of a period of calm and peace in a torn region to do a quick visit, which, by the way, would be impossible right now.
Now, it is important to understand for our audience, Maxime, that it is a very vast territory when we're talking about Congo.
It is, absolutely. Congo has, if I'm not mistaken, 2,300,000 square kilometers. So it's as big as all Western Europe from Portugal to Poland. So
wow, that's a good analogy to have an idea of the magnitude of this country.
Yeah, well, if you like analogies, here's another one. The Diocese of Uvira is located next to Lake Tanganyika, and it faces the country of Burundi. The Diocese of Uvira is 4 times as big as the whole country of Burundi itself. So that's wow. The massive size of some of the dioceses in Congo. Nevertheless, it has a relatively small population, about 100 million inhabitants, which is not so much for such a big country.
You know, in another conversation that I had with a Congolese priest, he mentioned a very particular phrase. He said that the natural resources of Congo are its blessing and its curse. Why is this sentiment about the resources of Congo?
Sure, well, that's a very sad topic. It's a blessing because, as someone said, Congo is a geological scandal. It has so much, it's unbelievable. It is of public knowledge that most of the content that we use for cell phones comes from Congo. And the same could be said about things like gold and diamond and silver and copper and so on, and the list is very long. But it's also a curse, because the richness produced in Congo goes in the wrong hands, or in no hands at all, if I can say so. So most of the population, and by most of the population I mean 90%, lives in absolute poverty. The ones who are lucky enough to work are basically exploited. So the work conditions are very, very hard. And there is almost no protection from the state, because Congo is a very big state, it's a very big country, as we said. So you've got a country the size of Western Europe with a capital located at in the southwestern part of the country, and the action, the digging the mines is happening on the other side, in the eastern part of the country. These are 3,000 or 4,000 kilometers of distance with no roads. There's no way to go from one point to the other except by plane. So the communication is very hard. And many times it looks like Kinshasa is actually not really ruling the country at all, because because they can't. It's just too big. Which is one theory about Congo. I don't need to go deeper into this topic, but some people believe it is not possible to rule the country. Fact is that a lot of things happen in the east that escape the control of both the state and the army. And we know for a fact that 80% of the production of the Congolese mines goes straight to China. But again, under what control? That remains to be seen. And that's how millions of people, because obviously the eastern part is the most densely inhabited part of the country, millions of people depend on the mines, but get maybe $1 or $2 a day for the work.
It's a blatant exploitation of the people and the resources, basically. Now, it's important that you are situating us in the east part of the country, because they're really very different realities from one part to the other. In the secular news, in the secular media, it is common to hear about a violent conflict, an armed conflict, and this is in the east side of the country. Can you explain to us who is fighting who? What is the reason for this armed conflict?
Okay. Yes. Well, that's also a very tricky topic. Let's go back to the 90s. Back in the 90s, Congo was ruled by a dictator named Mobutu, who died in 95 in Morocco. And the reason why he died outside of his own country is because by the end of his period of power, a genocide was launched in Rwanda, a neighboring country, as we all know. And apart from the amount of casualties in Rwanda itself, a large part of the population fled to Congo, because the border is very relative. It's just crossing a city and you're already in Congo. These were mostly Hutus. And as we know, Hutus were the ones who took the initiative of killing Tutsis. The Tutsi government that seized power in Rwanda after the genocide and after a long civil war, which is a chapter often forgotten in Rwandan history, this very Tutsi government went after the Hutus who had fled. So you have hundreds of thousands of civilians and soldiers or perpetrators in the jungle of Congo trying to escape from the Tutsi army, which is after them. They basically all died in the jungle under circumstances that cannot be described. But a group remains and is still very active and even has ties with the Congolese army, or had, with the purpose of overthrowing the Tutsi government. So right now what you have is a rebel group in Congo fighting another country. Now, as a response, this other country, Rwanda in this case, also sustains a militia in Congo called the M23 to officially fight this rebel group that I mentioned before, this Hutu group, but it could also have another agenda, which is a theory widely spread among experts of Congo. Rwanda is a very small country with a very big population. They could be trying to expand and to seize Congolese parts of the country, territories, because their own country is too small. That's one element. Then you have an Islamist group, which came from Uganda, ADF, which is also part of the Islamic State.
Okay.
Officially.
And when we talk about the Islamic State, is what we commonly known as ISIS.
Absolutely. They were created independently of ISIS, but they became part of it. And they're known as the bloodiest group in Congo. They operate further north in Butembo, Beni, which is right across the border of Uganda. And they're unfortunately known for being extremely violent. So that's another source of war, which has maybe nothing to do with the natural wealth of Congo, but maybe it does, because, war is often linked to money. And then you have ethnical conflicts which also arise in this part of the country. It would be too difficult to really discern who is fighting whom, but it is a fact that different Congolese groups are fighting each other. And because, as I said before, the army and the state are unable to solve this situation, which has been going on for 30 years now, people would just, seize arms and defend themselves. So the so-called self-defense groups, and these groups can develop into militias. And we said before that, it's a curse to be so rich, and it is indeed, because this militia often tend to control mines from which they draw the money that they need for the weapons and for their own survival. And so, as one expert said, it's a war that feeds itself. And so no one is actually interested in stopping the war because too much depends on it. So it's a vicious circle.
Wow. Maxime, evidently we want to know and we want to concentrate our conversation about the work that the church does in Congo. But evidently we need this context to understand why the church is doing what it's doing, right? One of the main areas where the church is involved is in what we call the internally displaced people, which are people that, as you're describing this crisis, that they have to move, they have to abandon their villages, their small towns because of the violence, or because they are just kicked out to exploit the resources of the area. So can you describe us a little bit what is the magnitude of the work the church is doing with internally displaced people?
So first of all, when we talk about IDPs in Congo, we have to understand the massive scale of the phenomenon. 6 million people.
Wow.
And it's increasing every year. So right now it could be even more. And the other thing is, it's so big that it's such a challenge that there is no solution. As a matter of fact, the United Nations are constantly asking for more funds to deal with the situation because they don't have them. You could read in the news on a regular basis that they're short on money to deal with the situation. So if the United Nations themselves cannot deal with it, just imagine the Congolese church. Of course. The Congolese church is very poor. That's a matter of fact. And not only is it poor, but it's also challenged by huge territories. We said before that some dioceses could be as big as whole countries. The best example is the Archdiocese of Kisangani, which is 146,000 square kilometers, it's unbelievable.
It's a country in itself.
It's a country in itself. So how could you pretend to put order in such a place?
To people, yes.
Now going back to the eastern area, even though dioceses could be smaller than that, they are still very, very big and there are no infrastructures, and the church has barely any source of income. So a typical situation with IDPs would be, maybe 2,000 people coming in the backyard of your parish. And that's a situation that I hear often.
Literally?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. As a matter of fact, just very recently I heard about, I called a monastery, a Benedictine monastery in Eastern Congo, who has, I think they mentioned 20,000 IDPs on their ground. People who fled violence and who seek refuge in a monastery, but there's no security.
Please describe for us one of these camps, just to have an idea of what the living conditions of these people.
I'll tell you what I saw in May 2022. I went to a refugee camp located close to Goma, right between Goma and the volcano, which, by the way, erupts.
I wanted to ask you about that later, yes.
So I went to a camp where 8,000 people lived by the time. And one of the things that shocked me is that they had no water. So we're talking about a camp located next to Lake Kivu.
When we say camp, what does that mean? They live in tents, in huts, in buildings?
So in this case, we're talking about small wooden houses which had been built partly by the Congolese government and by NGOs. Goma has a lot of NGOs because it's at the center of the conflict with the M23, plus the volcano, plus other things which made it destination for NGOs to stay. So you could literally find dozens of NGOs in Goma itself. Now, we drive a few miles, we get to this camp, and they have no water because the NGOs left. Not far away, as I said, they're just a few miles away, but the camp has no water. So you have 8,000 people who have to walk to Lake Kivu, one of the great, we call the region the Great Lakes, and Lake Kivu is one of them. So you have people who have to walk maybe 10 or 15 kilometers back and forth every day just to get water.
Wow.
So that's the kind of situation you face.
What about food?
I don't have any personal experience with foods, specifically speaking, but I can imagine it's just the same.
Very, very, very limited.
Very limited, indeed.
So the church gets resources from the universal church to support these efforts?
I wouldn't say it like this. The church gets resources from NGOs mostly, indirectly, because a typical situation, like I said, would be that IDPs would come to a place owned by the church. So, when you have a crowd of hundreds or thousands of people who just settle there, there's not much to do. You just open your gates and let them in. Again, the example of the monastery in the Goma region is a good example for that. But those are structures who have no resources themselves. They barely survive with what they have. So normally that's why NGOs are there. They would go and feed the people and give them maybe any help. The dioceses would maybe apply for projects and help with the distribution of things. But the universal church itself has no means to deal with the situation. Again, the UN itself doesn't, so who could?
Now, Maxime, let's talk about now the pastoral care of all these people. What the church is doing about all this?
So the church normally puts a priest or a team of a pastoral team, which could be priests, catechists, sisters. That happens frequently. You'll see camps which have been around for years, because of course the situations have been around for many years. People are born, live, and die in these camps. It's not like they come and go. It's basically their lives. So the church would send a priest. We had beautiful examples of that, and the priest who just deal with the IDPs like normal parishioners, if I can say so. They teach them catechism, they give them the sacraments, they're there for them. And we sometimes actually, as a foundation, help those priests with their needs, to make sure that they at least able to bring the faith to these people.
Are there chapels, or I would imagine churches as such, but places of worship in this camps?
Sure, yeah. Obviously, not like in a city or not like in a regular parish, but there are. I remember an example where we supported a project to build like a hall so that the youth could come to their priest and receive catechism, and it was built within one of these camps. So absolutely.
Maxime, share with us, if I can ask you, an example or a story that inspired you in terms of how these people live their faith. People under very dire circumstances.
Mm-hmm. A couple comes to my mind. I met a couple in Bukavu. Bukavu is also one of the cities that has been suffering so much under the war. And I met a couple which is dedicated to the ministry of family pastoral. Both went to Benin with a scholarship given by the Church in Need to study family pastoral at the John Paul II Institute. They came back after 2 years of study, and they've been at the service of the diocese since then to teach either the youth or young families, or whoever wants to hear it, about family pastoral and the message of the Church regarding love and family. And they've been doing this for years, decades maybe. And whenever they tell you about their work conditions, it's astonishing. They have nothing. They basically give a lot and receive very little, materially speaking. But they keep going with an enthusiasm that I've never seen before in Catholic people, and that was very inspiring to me. And that's when I thought, this country might be full of misery, and it could seem hopeless many times, but the message of the gospel went down into the hearts of a few people who are doing miracles.
Yes, that's always the case of people living under these very, very, very difficult circumstances. And Maxime, we're running out of time, but I don't want to finish our conversation without talking about the needs. How our audience, our viewers can help, or the church in general can help the church in Congo.
So the list of needs is very long, and we're running out of time. So I'd say, from the Church in Need, we want to pray for these people before and foremost, because if God doesn't help, then everything is useless, and it's something we firmly believe in. We need to inform people about what's happening in Congo, and that's very important.
That was something shocking to me preparing the interview, Maxime. There is not enough information, to be honest, about Congo, and when you hear these accounts in firsthand, like you, it's a scandal, an international scandal.
It is,
and it's so little information. So I think that yes, it's very important what you're saying, that this has to be known.
Yeah, the Pope went to Congo last year.
Yes, that's
right.
And
we need to address the situation. We need to understand what's going on, and then of course we can help with donations and with financial and material help. The Church in Need is very much involved in the formation of priests, because we believe priests can be agents for the improvement of things. They bring faith, but they also bring hope to the people.
Of course.
It is a big difference for people when a priest is among themselves and when there's none. And that's why bishops work a lot on creating the structures so that priests can be sent to these remote areas and not only come once a month or once a year to celebrate the Eucharist or hear confessions. They need a stable presence of the church, and that's something we help with.
Well, we know that you're going back soon to Congo, so we wish you best luck, and we really thank you for this time with us here in the program.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us in another program of Where God Weeps. If you want to know more about the work that the church is doing in Congo, we encourage you to contact the information at the end of this program. Thank you, and God bless.